In chapter 17, we're looking at John coming to us with the picture of the great prostitute on the beast. So far, John has come to us in 5 clearly defined sections. 5 sections in Revelation so far, with 7 parts. 7 letters, 7 seals. Sound familiar? 7 trumpets, 7 visions, and last week, the 7 bowls of wrath. So this week, John sees a great prostitute who's seated on many waters. So this is the third woman that we're meeting in Revelation. There are 4 women in Revelation that, you don't need to know this to get into heaven, but there are 4 women mentioned. The first one is Jezebel in chapter 2 in the letter to Thyatira. She's the one that's leading Thyatira, the church there, into apostasy, into false teaching, into idolatry. So she's called Jezebel after that wicked queen in the Old Testament that was full of idolatry. That's the first woman we meet already in chapter 2. Then we meet the woman clothed with the sun. Remember her? The Catholic Church, and she has a child, and the child is taken up into heaven. The Catholic Church thinks that's the Virgin Mary. We would say that's originally Israel, but then the church, we give the child, we present the child to the world. So that was the woman clothed with sun. That's chapter 12. Then the great prostitute here in chapter 17. And then finally we'll meet the bride of Christ, Jerusalem, us, in chapter 21. So those are the 4 women of Revelation, and this is probably the least appealing of the women. There are 2 bad women and 2 good women in Revelation, and this is probably the worst of the lot. So the Spirit carries John away into a wilderness, into a desert. That's a place of revelation, a place of getting away from the world so they can really look at it. He takes John into a desert, and there John sees the woman sitting on a scarlet beast. The woman, we're told in verse 6, is drunk with the blood of the saints, the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. So she's pictured by John holding a great cup, and the cup is full of the blood of the martyrs and the abominations that she's brought about, the text says. So the beast itself, destined for destruction, will turn on the woman and destroy her. So eventually the beast is going to actually turn on the woman that he carries. So talked about here is the whole idea of sexual immorality. The woman, by the way, we're going to find out on the beast. Let's see at least one good picture of her. This is from a Spanish, medieval Spanish text, and you can see her picture there with holding the cup up, and the beast might look familiar to you. We'll talk about who that beast is, but the woman is identified as the city of Rome. Really, she's called Babylon, but we know already from Revelation that when we see Babylon, we're meant to think of Rome. So she's the city of Rome, riding atop the beast, and I might as well let you know, I think that beast fits the beast we met in chapter 13, the sea beast, the beast from the sea, that we said was the Roman government originally, and is any government that seeks to lead God's people into apostasy or set up its own form of religion, that's what she's riding on. So when we talk about sexual immorality, and you're going to see that word show up twice in our chapter, the sexual immorality can certainly refer to that woman who's the city of Rome. Rome, was it the great philosopher Seneca said, Rome is a sewer. And he meant by that it's sexually so immoral it was known across the world that this is an ugly place in terms of morality. So yes, it means sexual immorality, but it means much more than that. It means unfaithfulness. It means for Christians compromising our faith, being unfaithful. So I'm wondering if anybody in the room has ever heard of these 2 biblical figures, Oholah and Oholibah. Oholah and Oholibah. In all my years of baptizing babies, I never baptized an Oholah or an Oholibah. And it's a good thing because they're sisters who are both prostitutes in Ezekiel chapter 23. So Oholah is the older one. And this is Ezekiel 23. If you have your Bible, you can check it out. The whole chapter is given over to these 2 sisters. And the older sister, Ahola, represents, we're told in the chapter, she represents, this sounds like Revelation stuff, she represents Samaria. What was Samaria in the ancient world? The capital of what? The northern kingdom, Israel. So Ahola represents the northern kingdom, and Aholibah represents the southern kingdom. She represents the city of Jerusalem. So these two sisters, both prostitutes, go chasing after Assyria, which conquered Israel, and Babylon, which conquered Judah, and they themselves are destroyed by the very paramours that they entertained as prostitutes. The reason I mention that is that you've got prostitutes associated with cities. That's already done in Ezekiel. And here you have this prostitute riding atop the beast, who we're told is the whore of Babylon, and we know that that's the city of Rome originally. All right, so a little introduction to what's going on with this text. Now, when we talk about sexual immorality as a metaphor more than the actual sexual morality, at that point, I think it's good to consult a guy that has a unique spin on Revelation, and that's Eugene Peterson. Is that a name you know? Did The Message, if you've ever read the paraphrase of the scriptures. He was also a prolific writer and thinker. He passed away not too long ago. But in his book, he makes the point that the sexual morality here is actually about interfering with Christian worship. And he thinks that the real issue in Revelation is the worship of Christians being threatened by the worship of the emperor, of the beast. And now I'm going to give you a rather lengthy excerpt from Peterson, but it really makes the point well. St. John has nothing to say about the sexual conditions in the late first century. His business is with the conditions of faith. His pastoral responsibilities prevent his Christians from quitting the enduringly arduous life of worship in favor of something that appears just as religious, looks a lot better, and is a lot easier. He tells them about the great whore to open their eyes to the differences between the worship of the Lamb and this other worship, which is not worship at all, but keeps us from worship. Whoredom is sex connected with money. The physical union of the sexes is given a price tag. When the intercourse has been paid for, the relationship is at an end until whatever time is paid for again. The coupling is sexual, the relationship is commercial. The terrible thing about the whore is not that she takes strangers to bed with her, but that once getting them there, she uses her body to lie about life. There is no joining of lives, only of genitals. Sorry about the language here. The exploration and development of our unique human identity, of which sex is the physical means, is replaced by elaborate and deceiving fantasies. A fundamental impoverishment of a person is accomplished behind a seduction of perfume, silks, and flatteries. Whoredom uses sex to lie about life. The truth of life is that love is a gift, that relationships are commitments, that sexuality is the sacrament of spirituality. The whore's life is that love is purchased, that relationships are deals, that sexuality is appetite. Whoredom is the use of good to do evil, the use of a good body to demean the person, the use of the means of realizing our identity to depersonalize identities. Worship under the aspect of the great whore is the commercialization of our great need and deep desire for meaning, love, and salvation, for the completeness of ourselves from beyond ourselves. The great whore is presented in implicit contrast to the virgin bride. After the judgment of the whore is complete, the contrast will become explicit in the marriage supper of the Lamb. The bride is as sexual a metaphor as the whore, but it forms an absolute contrast. For the whore, sex is the service of commerce. With the bride, sex is devoted to love. For the whore, sex is a contract. For the bride, sex is a life commitment. For the whore, sex is a calculation. For the bride, sex is an offering. I really like his emphasis on what's at stake for the Christians at this time, 95, 96 AD, is their worship as a worshiping body of Christians. And what's threatening that is the whole alternative they have for this commercialized worship of the emperor, where you just kind of get it done by pinching some incense and pouring out a libation on the altar of the emperor, and that takes care of it. It's too easy, and the discipline is gone. This is a good time to take that approach to Revelation, I think, because we've just come off the pandemic, which posed a huge threat to the worship of Christians. It emptied our churches. The church we attend at this point, Woodbury Lutheran, is back to full attendance again. They're back to where they were before it, but it's taken this number of years to do that. And I think Crossview is getting there as well, to be back where they were. But when worship is threatened, Christians should always be concerned. And I like Peterson's emphasis on Revelation, really being concerned about what this woman is going to do to worship of the first Christians. And there's always that threat before us for the easy kind of commercialized religion and worship that requires very little of us. All right, let's get into the text then, finally. All right. I just wanted you to see, I'm getting all these illustrations from these medieval texts. That's the medieval text that illustration comes from. Notice it's in the middle of the page. Notice all the way back in the 11th and 12th centuries, they already had 2-column Bibles in fairly large print. You can see how this would appear if you were reading your Bible. And if a person was reading it out loud because you were illiterate, you could at least see the picture of something illustrating it for you. All right, here's verses 1 and 2. Then one of the 7 angels who had the 7 bowls, remember the 7 bowls last week, came and said to me, "Come, I'll show you the judgment of the great prostitute who is seated on many waters, with whom the kings of the earth have committed sexual immorality, and with the wine of whose sexual immorality the dwellers on earth have become drunk." So, John gets to see the judgment, that is God's judgment, on the great prostitute, symbolizing the city of Rome, with prophetic descriptors of the ancient Babylon, the city of Babylon, another city condemned by God. In verse 18, by the way, the angel identifies the woman, here's where we get it from, as the great city that had dominion over the kings of the earth. That's verse 18. So, again, these are metaphors and they're mysteries to people who don't know the story like Christians do. So twice in this text, in this chapter, you're going to see the word mystery. And the mystery word says that this is something Christians can understand, but non-Christians can't. But here we're given that it's Babylon. Notice it doesn't say Rome, because if you're passing this text around inside and outside of jails and stuff, if you're in prison, the jailers are going to look at the stuff that's being passed, and they're not going to understand it at all. But Christians understood Babylon. Oh, he's talking about Rome. Verse 18 tells us that that's what this city is. Like Babylon, she's seated on many waters. Later, in verse 15, the angel gives new meaning to that phrase, many waters. That is, being peoples and multitudes and nations and languages. She's influential. Note that both Isaiah and Jeremiah, in their prophecy, use rising, raging waters to describe the invasions of both Assyria and Babylon on Israel and Judah. Twice in verse 2, as we've seen already, the word sexual immorality. I've given you that Greek word before, porneia. We get our word pornography from that word. Have committed sexual immorality, and the wine of whose sexual immorality the dwellers on earth have become drunk. So the sexual morality not only is the physical sexual morality that goes on in Rome, but also the influence that this is having across the world in terms of tempting people into unfaithfulness, including Christians. All right, verses 3 and 4. Well, that's another one. Here's a more contemporary look at her. Verses 3 and 4. And he carried me away in the spirit into a wilderness, and I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast that was full of blasphemous names and it had 7 heads and 10 horns. The woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet and adorned with gold and jewels and pearls, holding in her hand a golden cup full of abominations and the impurities of her sexual immorality. All right, so now he can witness the great prostitute, and out in the desert, he can learn, he can be inspired, he can not be tempted by the great prostitute, be separated from her, and where he can see the world more clearly. So he sees her sitting on a scarlet beast with 7 heads and 10 horns. Verse 3. We've seen this beast before, as I mentioned in Revelation 13:1, the sea beast representing originally the Roman Empire, and then in history, any nation usurping the rule of God, any anti-Christian civil government which carries on a religion of its own. So I believe that this is the same beast. If you read some commentaries, not everybody would agree with me on that. Some people think this is actually Satan himself. It just fits too perfectly onto 13:1 that I think it has to be the beast from the sea. Verse 9 helps with this definition. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman is seated. The city of Rome was built on 7 hills, as you probably know. So again, that's an affirmation that we're probably on the right track, understanding this woman to be the city of Rome. The prostitute sits on a beast full of blasphemous names. So this could be the names of the Roman pantheon and Roman emperors from John's day who took divine names. Domitian, we know, took names like Savior, Divine, Lord of the World, Lord. I think I mentioned earlier in this class that one of the first creeds of the church is Jesus Christ is Lord. That was in a direct affront to Caesar as Lord. That first creed was a polemical creed saying, no, Jesus is Lord, not Caesar. So when you look at the great prostitute, she's arrayed in purple and scarlet and adorned with gold, jewels, and silver, all enhancing her seductions. This description of the woman tells us a lot about her, a lot about the city of Rome and its character. The prostitute is influential. Remember, those waters that she's on are the waters of multitudes and nations. So she's an influential prostitute. She's evil. She rides on an evil beast with the same characteristics as the beast from the sea. She's attractive. I know those depictions of her that we've looked at so far don't make her very attractive, but she is attractive. She wears jewels and wears what, at least at this time, would have been seen as very attractive. Where did they get this picture of a prostitute? Probably from the temples that were around the provinces. They're certainly there in Rome as well, to Jupiter especially. Domitian built a temple to Jupiter. But around the provinces of the Roman Empire, there were many temples to the Roman gods. One to Aphrodite, for instance, in Corinth. Very expensive there, and they had temple prostitutes, 1,000 prostitutes at that temple in Corinth, so that sailors would say you can only spend one night in Corinth. It was very expensive for the temple worship that happened through prostitution. So she's very attractive. Another commentator suggested that this is a takeoff of the wife of Caesar Claudius, Messalina, who, when it got to be nighttime, she would dress up as a prostitute and leave her marriage bed and go out into the brothels and become a prostitute. We're not sure where all this imagery comes from, but it's very vivid. She's repulsive. She's drunk with the blood of the saints, as it says in these texts, and the impurities of her sexual immorality. So she holds a golden cup full of abominations and the impurities of her sexual immorality. Again, the city of Rome was known for its horrible morality, but this becomes a warning for Christians regarding our own faithfulness to God, especially in worship. Here's an interesting one from a German Bible, century before Luther. And again, you can see the golden cup raised up over her head. She's riding side saddle. I hadn't noticed that before. All right. And on her forehead was written a name of mystery. There's the word mystery, which means this is something Christians can understand. It's not a mystery to us. Babylon the Great, Rome, mother of prostitutes and earth's abominations. And I saw the woman drunk with the blood of the saints, the blood of the martyrs. So her name is on her forehead, and that was rather common in the ancient brothels, that when you walked into the brothel, each prostitute would have their first name on a placard on their forehead, actually. So again, this is typical of ancient prostitutes to wear that frontlet on their foreheads. First a mystery, then for Christians a mystery resolved. The name is Babylon the Great, and so forth. Cup in her hand, she's drunk with the blood of Christian martyrs, described in terms of cherished identity. We're called saints and those who bore testimonies. What wonderful descriptive words. Saints, those called to be holy, to be set apart from the rest of the world, and those who are martyrs. Remember, the word for witness is martyrion, who are witnesses of Jesus. So what you pick up in these verses is there's this delight almost of Rome in its persecution of Christians. There's a joy in persecuting Christians. It's like drinking wine, getting drunk on wine, getting drunk on dead Christians. So a lot of you know the story of the burning of Rome and Nero, and how he covered that up. He ordered the burning of Rome himself so that he could rebuild it and become a favorite Caesar. And it backfired on him because they discovered that he had ordered that the Rome be set on fire. So remember, he blames it on the Christians. This is about 64 AD. And Christians are horribly persecuted and killed, sewn into hides and taken on by ravenous dogs and so forth. Tacitus, the historian, gives us a really good description of that. I don't want to read too much of it because it's pretty vivid. But it is one of the texts where we get, we actually get the use of the word Christ or Christus. All human efforts, all the lavish gifts of the emperor and the propitiations of the gods did not banish the sinister belief that the fire was the result of an order. Consequently, to get rid of the report, Nero fastened the guilt and inflicted the most exquisite tortures on a class hated for their abominations, called Christians by the populace. Christus, from whom the name had its origin. This is a very important text. This is a secular historian who mentions Christus, Christ, in his history. So, Christus, from whom the name had its origin, suffered the extreme penalty during the reign of Tiberius at the hands of one of our procurators, Pontius Pilate. This is the Bible being affirmed by a secular historian. This is really cool stuff. And a most mischievous superstition, thus checked for the moment, again broke out, not only in Judea, the first source of the evil, but even in Rome, where all things hideous and shameful from every part of the world find their center and become popular. Accordingly, an arrest was first made of all who pleaded guilty. Then, upon their information, an immense multitude was convicted, not so much of the crime of firing the city as of hatred of mankind. Mockery of every sort was added to their deaths. Covered with the skins of beasts, they were torn by dogs and perished, or were nailed to crosses, or were doomed to the flames and burned to serve as a nightly illumination from when daylight had expired. They actually lined the streets of Rome with burning Christians. Hence, even for criminals who deserved extreme and exemplary punishment, there arose a feeling of compassion, for it was not, as it seemed, for the public good, but to glut one man's cruelty that they were being destroyed. Very important text historically, but also tells us that persecution of Christians was real. The first major persecution was under Nero, and the next one was under Domitian. Well, guess when Domitian ruled? At the time of Revelation, at the time that John's being written. So, as we look at this, we get this strong sense of persecution being very real. All right. Another picture, Pat Mavrenko-Smith. We bring her art in quite a bit. The Whore and the Beast, she titles it. I'm not sure why I circled her face. I guess because she seemed to be enjoying it so much. Okay, 6b to 11. When I saw her, that is the prostitute, I marveled greatly. But the angel said to me, "Why do you marvel? I will tell you the mystery," there's that word again, "of the woman and of the beast with 7 heads and 10 horns that carries her. The beast that you saw was and is not, and is about to rise from the bottomless pit and go to destruction. And the dwellers on earth, whose names have not been written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, will marvel to see the beast, because it was and is not and is to come." So the beast from the sea appears here again with its 7 heads and 10 horns. And remember, heads is a sign of intellect or knowledge. Horns, a sign of power and strength. Note that the beast rises to be destroyed, will rise from the bottomless pit and go to destruction. So this abyss is both the source of the unholy trinity, Satan and the 2 beasts, and their destructive end. And the lake of fire is where they all end up. We'll see that coming fairly soon. The angel describes the beast as one who was and is not and is to come. Again, perhaps remembering that stubborn Nero resuscitated, coming back from the dead. It also covers the history of the beast, here, gone, and then back for a while. All right. Chapter 13, the heads and horns of the beast signal its intellect and power. Here the significance of the 7 heads is expanded to take in both the 7 hills of Rome and the 7 kings. So we should probably spend some time talking about those kings. Five of the kings have fallen. These are possibly the first 5. I need to go to the next slide, I think. There we go. Yeah, this calls for a mind with wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman is seated. They are also 7 kings, 5 of whom have fallen. One is, the other has not yet come. And when he does come, he must remain only a little while. Wow, try to solve that. As for the beast that was and is not, it is an 8th, but it belongs to the 7, and it goes to destruction. There have been many PhD dissertations written on what's he talking about here? Who are these different kings? Well, 5 of the kings have fallen. So I think I might have a slide on this. Well, that's the 7th. There it is. 5 of the kings have fallen. These are possibly the first 5 Roman emperors. Augustus, Tiberius, I've given their dates there, Caligula, Claudius, and Nero. So that could be, if we're talking about Caesars of Rome, those are the first 5 Roman emperors. One is, in verse 10, could refer to Vespasian, and the one still to come to rule, only a brief time, would be Titus, who is Vespasian's son. Do you see that in the 2nd column there? Titus, by the way, when he was a general, was the one who sacked and destroyed Jerusalem. That's the older brother of Domitian. And Domitian would be then the 8th emperor at the time John writes Revelation, sometimes seen as Nero revisited. So though this original cast of kings is appealing, the number 7 may simply suggest all political leaders who oppose God and God's people. So I think one needs to be careful. This seems kind of nice, but there's some problems if you dig deeper in the timing of all of this. And again, of those kings, Augustus began the concept of the divinity of dead Caesars, that once you died as Caesar, you were to be hallowed as a god. By the time we reach Domitian, 60-some years later, Domitian is saying not only those who have died, but the living Caesar, at least out in the provinces, gets a temple, and you're to worship the emperor there. And that's during the time of Patmos. These are some rabbit holes, I know, but a detailed description of Domitian's appearance, I chuckled as I read this from historian Suetonius, who devotes a substantial part of his biography to the personality of Emperor Domitian. Listen to this description of his physical stature. He was tall of stature with a modest expression and a high color. His eyes were large, but his sight was somewhat dim. He was handsome and graceful too, especially when a young man, and indeed in his whole body, with the exception of his feet, the toes of which were somewhat cramped. In later life, he had the further disfigurement of baldness. That's a disfigurement. A protruding belly. What's different? And spindling legs, though the latter had become thin from a long illness. So there's a debate among historians on how deep the persecution under Domitian was. But I think a strong case can be made that there were Christians who lost their lives because they refused to worship the emperor. There's a record of that. It may not be as expansive as we think, as some have written about, but Domitian definitely had persecution going in the first emperor to openly require worship of Caesar. All right. Is a denarius with Domitian on it? He liked to take the name Augustus, too. His wife, Domitia, was related to Augustus, so he'd like to go back to the first emperor. Another look at a Roman coin with his image on it. Bust. All right, verse 12. And the 10 horns that you saw are 10 kings who have not yet received royal power. Now we're talking about a whole other set of kings. But they are to receive authority as kings for 1 hour, for a very short time, together with the beasts. I don't think we should focus too much on the number 10 there, other than it being a symbolic, complete number. So lots of kings, all the kings. These are of one mind, and they hand over their power and authority to the beast. They will make war on the Lamb, and the Lamb will conquer them. For he is the Lord of lords and King of kings, and those with him are called and chosen and faithful. So, for a short time, there'll be a group of kings that rise up together with the beast to make war on the Lamb, and they will be conquered. I believe this refers to the last battle, which we'll be looking at, which we already have looked at briefly at Armageddon. Also, these are political forces through history aligned with Satan against Christ and his church. They have no sanction or authority from God. They're of one mind, but strangely, they're driven by power, but they're also busy doing what God would have them do along the way of their work. They hand over their power and authority to the beast. They'll make war on the Lamb. The Lamb will conquer them. For he is Lord of lords, King of kings. Those with him are called chosen and faithful. I love those two descriptors for those of us who are with the Lord. Chosen and faithful. All right. Last verses. And the angel said to me, the waters that you saw where the prostitute is seated are peoples and multitudes and nations and languages. These are the waters on which the prostitute was riding on the beast. And the 10 horns that you saw, they and the beast will hate the prostitute. So now the beast is going to turn on the prostitute. They will make her desolate and naked. Just the way in Ezekiel 23 that the prostitutes ended up being destroyed by their paramours, so that happens here. They will make her desolate and naked and devour her flesh and burn her up with fire. For God has put into their hearts, listen to this, to carry out his purpose by being of one mind and handing over their royal power to the beast until the words of God are fulfilled. So you have this interesting thought that God can actually get his will done through evil forces, through a person who's not a follower of Christ, or a person who's not a follower of God. We got the first glimpses of this in the Babylonian captivity of Israel, where God raises up a pagan emperor, Cyrus, to turn them free, to set them free. So to me, this is heartening that you can have an evil emperor, an evil government leader, and God can actually accomplish his purposes through that person. Even though his character may be raunchy, even though he may not be a good person, may not be a believer, God can still use that person to good purposes. I think that's a strong message for us as we think about things today. And the woman that you saw is the great city that has dominion over the kings of the earth. Verse 18 makes clear that the woman in the vision is the great city Rome, or any government that leads its people into immorality and idolatry. So again, these verses echo the fate of those two prostitutes in Ezekiel's prophecy who end up being destroyed by their own paramours. All right, I think I have one last piece of art, and this is my favorite illustrator of Revelation, William Blake. Amazing watercolors with ink, and you can see his depiction. I have to say, of all the depictions of the great prostitute, this is the most appealing one. She's really, truly a beautiful woman, and that's what is supposed to happen there. But you can see the abominations coming out of the cup, the martyrs, those who've lost their lives because of her, and you can see the beast and the waters beneath the beast. It's a beautiful depiction of a really raunchy chapter in the Bible, but there it is. All right, some take-home truths. Citizens of world-leading nations can be blind to their nation's sins. So you can be in the middle of a nation that's guilty of sin and not see it. That's what went on in Rome. There were very few critics of the morality of Rome. People went along with what went in Rome, do what they do. So they did. So we can miss the sins of our own nation because we're right in the midst of it. I think that's really going on today. I think of the sin of abortion, for instance. How can you even think about saying that taking the life of an unborn child is not sinful? Well, that happens because of the contagion. You change the language, make it, what do they call it now? Women's reproductive rights. Change the language, and everybody suddenly feels comfortable with what most thinking people and even feeling people would say, that can't be a good thing. All right. Sin wrapped in nationalistic language is still sin. So you can wrap all of this in, this is Rome, this is the King of Kings, our Caesar. All the national language doesn't hide what's sinful. Two primary life purposes of Christians: holy living. We're meant to be saints. Doesn't mean we're sinless, but we're meant to live as people that are different, set apart. We march to the beat of a different drummer. And bearing witness to Christ. Living a holy life, a life set apart for God, and bearing witness to Jesus Christ. All forces opposing God and God's people are destined for destruction. This is the God we have. And when we get deeper now into these last chapters of Revelation, you're going to see a God who's very serious about sin and idolatry and apostasy. We're going to go through some tough chapters. But I can't wait to join with you in studying chapters 21 and 22, because that's where we get the glimpse of a new heaven and a new earth. But we got to go through hell to get there. All right. Let's stop there and see if you have some comments. It's a tough chapter.
I missed the author of that small thing talking about how bad things were.
That I read the excerpt from was Eugene Peterson. Tacitus, the historian Tacitus. Yeah. And a very important text, not just for our text tonight, but he mentions Christus. He mentions Christ as a historic figure and a completely secular writer, and mentions Pontius Pilate.
How do you spell his name?
Tacitus, Tacitus, Tacitus. Google Tacitus, a very respected historian. Contemporary with the Caesars, not a later historian. Yeah, all right. Mike is there. Any questions? Got about 13, 14 minutes.
I was wondering if you thought there might be any connection between last week we talked about the bowls of wrath and then the bowl that the prostitute is carrying. I was thinking back on Revelation 5:8 about the bowls of incense, which were the prayers of saints that were being held by those who had been persecuted.
Yeah, there's always a little bit of confusion between censers and bowls. I think the censer is the incense going up, and that was the martyrs under the altar where their prayers are ascending to the Lord.
So it just used the word bowl in the NIV. But anyway,
I haven't checked the Greek, but to see if the word for the cup is the same as the word for bowl, and
okay.
I haven't checked it. I will check it though.
Okay.
Yeah, because that would be an interesting point. Is it the same word for the bowls of wrath, and it's just called a cup here, but could it be a bowl that she's holding up? Yeah. You're giving me more work to do now. I'll look at that. Others? I kind of thought there might not be too many questions on this chapter. How do you feel about well, you're not going to answer the question probably. The use of sexual morality in this way, that it's more than just the actual sexual morality. It's a signal of the cheapening of worship, that we go for the cheap commercial kind of worship rather than the worship that is true from the heart. Yeah, Julie.
So my question is really more almost from last week. You had mentioned when Christ comes that we will go up and then our bones, that have passed away, our bones will also go to heaven.
Well, yeah. The way I see that, and that's fine, we can go back to that, because I know I had 2 or 3 folks email me about that. When you die, I believe the next thing that happens to you, Julie, and to me, that we will be immediately with Christ in paradise. Where is paradise? Paradise is where Christ is. It might be a place, it might just be the presence of Christ. But for me, the good news is, when I die, who I am, Dean, my soul, will continue to live, and I won't be alone. I don't know if you ever worried about that. What's it like to be dead? Are you all by yourself? No, you'll never be by yourself. Christ will always be with you, with your soul. That's the first step. And I think our life after death is a 2-step process. Now, I may be wrong, but we'll all find out together. Okay. The second step in the process is, while you're resting with Jesus, and you may be doing a few other things we don't know. You might be praying, like the martyrs under the altar praying, could be. But the second step is, when Christ returns in glory on the clouds, your body will be raised from its grave, or wherever it is, the ashes, the scattered, wherever your body is, he'll put that all together, and your body will be raptured up to join Jesus and the saints in the clouds, and you will be with him, soul and body, together for eternity, in a new heaven and a new earth. Hear what I said? A new heaven and a new earth. So earth is not going to disappear, it's going to be made new. It might disappear and be totally destroyed, and a brand new earth out of nothing happens. Maybe that's what the new creation is. But this was a big aha for me just a few years ago. in reading a book called Surprised by Hope, that's how it's going to work. So you don't die and immediately go to heaven because the new heaven hasn't been made yet. You got to wait for the new heaven and the new earth, and that'll come in when Jesus returns in glory. Does that get to it?
Yes, yes.
What
thank
was
you.
confusing to you about that? Or was it not confusing?
It was, I guess, I just thought our souls went to heaven.
Oh, you didn't know about the physical body? Oh, yeah, the physical resurrection is really important. In fact, now that I'm retired and I go to funerals, I always like to listen. Is this guy going to talk about the physical resurrection? Or is he going to just talk about the soul going to heaven? Because Jesus rose physically, and you will rise physically. You get that body back that's standing right there right now, but the perfect body of Julie. It's nice now already, but I mean, but
Nice
it'll be the
follow-up.
perfect physical body of Julie that'll be raised glorious. And what
Do you
that,
get it back as you die, or do you get it back as a teenager?
oh, that's a great question. How old is that body? A view that I don't hold to is that, probably because of my investment in this, not liking the view, is that you'll be as old in heaven as you are in terms of having been a Christian. So I've been a Christian for over 70 years since my baptism. I don't want to be 70 whatever. I don't think that holds. There's some churches that actually teach that, not ours. Ours teaches that you will be the perfect you body. Whatever that perfect state of being Julie is physically, that's what you'll be. That'll include your age. So will there be different age groups in heaven? Don't know. Yeah, good question. I know if we talk about something else, we get some discussion going here.
You said something that sounded really interesting to me, and maybe you weren't implying what I think you were, but you said when you die, you, Dean, your soul will go to paradise. I think that's what you said.
I did.
And the implication, this is my question, that to me implies that right now, you, Dean, are your soul even now. Quite often we think of the soul as only the thing representing us that goes to heaven. But are you thinking that you are your soul now? And that inner being and spirit, etc., is with you now, and that's what will
yes.
go to.
Yeah.
So
my soul began at my conception. That's when the soul of Dean and body began. It will be there for all eternity. And we don't teach the immortality of the soul, that Dean's soul was out there floating somewhere and somehow the gods brought him into my mom's uterus. No, that's what's so terrible about abortion is that this is a soul that's involved, and you're ending the life of a soul on earth. Will that life continue? I believe it will. The soul of the unborn will continue. And at the point that life was taken, that soul goes to rest with Jesus. The soul of the unborn child. I know that's very controversial, but I believe that. I got to believe that.
but you think,
I've got my soul with me now.
and you are your soul. Is that kind
It's
of
the essence of who I am.
the essence of your
It's
being?
my spirit.
That's really interesting, I
Yeah,
think.
right. If I shed my body, there'd still be my soul. And it's the essence of who I am. It's my spirit, my life. Yeah.
Spirit, soul, mind is part of all that. too.
It is. It is. And you'll have all of that with you in heaven. So you're not going to be some automaton. You're still going to have a personality in heaven. You're going to be you. Yeah.
So is the new heaven and the new earth one in the same place or different places?
That's a very good question.
And where do we reside if we're obviously in heaven?
Well, if
What
you're a
would
Mormon,
occupy
if you're a
the-
Mormon, you have, gradations of where you land.
Okay.
We don't teach that. But I have to say, I don't know. I don't know is it heaven and earth combined, or are they two separate places? And that's such a great question. I really mean it is. Because when you track this all the way along the way of discovery, and believe me, this has been a journey for me, that's a question I've left with unanswered. Is it two places, the new heaven and the new earth? If so, who lives where?
The new earth seems like a beautiful place, so that wouldn't be like the other place, and you wouldn't think it would be the unoccupied place. And hell, is the sea of
Well,
fire.
the lake of fire. The
lake of fire, right. So okay.
Yeah. So I think there's more to eternal life after death than just heaven. The New Jerusalem comes what? Up or down? Comes down to earth. There's something going on with the earth here, and it's a new creation, a new kind of earth. I think I wrote one of you today that C.S. Lewis talks about grass in the new heaven and new earth being hard grass, real grass. I like that. That we'll still have things that we're familiar with, but it'll be a glorified new creation. So earth will still have some of the characteristics of earth, but in a glorified state as a new creation. But your question of, are they two places or one? Because the scriptures say that there will be a new heaven and a new earth, and a new earth, it makes me feel like they're two places. Yeah.
Where we end up.
Where we land, I'm not sure. Yeah. All right. Any other questions? You know, repeatedly with Revelation, this is the topic people want to come back to, the topic I want to come back to. Because we're interested to know, where are we headed? What's it going to be like on the other side? And so I really appreciate your questions, because I think most people have those questions. But a lot of people who are Christians today don't realize that there will be a new heavens and a new earth, both, waiting for us. Go ahead.
This is what I captured, what I thought we were taught recently here, in service and not. So anybody correct me if I misinterpreted this, but the way I understood it is, I was so excited, but it's that heaven was brought down to earth, and earth was made like the Garden of Eden again, as it should be, as it was intended to be. That's was my take on the whole thing. And then, I'm just giving my observation there and understanding. I do have a question, though.
So that view
Yep.
would say that the new heaven and the new earth is really one, that heaven comes down to
Exactly. Heaven comes down to earth,
Yeah.
and it's all brand new again, as it
earth. Yeah,
was intended.
I'd have to work on that, because the text talks about new heavens and a new earth, two locations. The obvious thing, well, who's in heaven? Well, God.
Yep.
So maybe God still keeps his place in the new heavens, and we're left on earth.
I just see it as one, all one. It's one.
Back here on earth,
Yeah.
in a glorified state,
Yeah.
paradise restored.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I would just say, refer to some of the other past or different notes from some of the sermons
Sure.
that were given
Sure.
on Sunday. The question that I have, where my thinking is I thought I heard in the Revelation study here that, I think I heard it here, that when we die, we, all bodies in spirit go to rest with Jesus for a moment before, and I saw that as judgment. There's no such thing as the purgatory stuff and all that, but everybody's just resting there until heaven comes to, it's
Yeah, the only
all
thing
one
I'd say
again.
there is I don't really believe that my body and my soul will go to paradise to be with Jesus. And when I die, after
for
I
sure.
die, you can visit my grave and dig it up, and my bones will still be there.
Absolutely.
So it's just my soul
Just your soul, yep.
that goes to paradise. And that's Jesus to the thief. Today you'll be with me in paradise.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It
definitely.
seems like time is irrelevant. It could, however long time is. Time is
Right.
just like a fleeting second, a millisecond or whatever, but there's that time that, like the 1800s, someone died in the 1800s.
Right.
They're sitting in this spot that's probably a millisecond of time, even though it's 200 years, 300 years for us or whatever, until Christ, comes again. But there's this place where we all sit with Jesus for a while. I thought I heard that. And during that time,
We
I
rest,
was-
blessed are
we-
those who die in the Lord, for they rest from their labors. We rest with Jesus. We're with Christ. And
Are we judged already by
No,
that
no,
time? That's
no.
what I thought.
We
Everybody
wait
goes.
for the physical resurrection for the judgment.
And then we wait for that. Yeah, so we're all in this mini spot for just a fleeting moment, and that's the judgment part. And when we move from there, and it's heaven on earth. So that's what's playing out in my human
Okay.
head.
Okay, thanks, appreciate that. All right, let's send you back or to your groups with prayer. Let's pray. Lord, what vivid images you present in your scriptures. This was a tough one for the great prostitute, Rome, and governments that seek to destroy our worship as we worship government itself or specific individuals. We pray again, Lord, keep us faithful to you. Save us from compromise. Save us from missing the sins of our culture because we're a part of it. Give us wisdom. Give us strength. Keep us your holy people. Make us strong witnesses to your truth. In your strong name, the name of Jesus, we pray. Amen.